Hi to all, this is the backup video for Lab 2. In this lab, we are going to start using LibreOffice Base. We expect that you already installed it on your computers. If not, please follow our guide to install it. And then you can run it. If you type Base in your Start menu, you can directly run LibreOffice Base here. And this is the software that we are going to use for creating our database, and this database is going to include all our tables, all our relationships and queries, and in the future we are also going to implement some graphical user interfaces in them, and all of these will be contained in just one file. And now we are creating that single file here. We have the option to open an existing database as well. So for example, this is the database that I created earlier. So I can just double click on it, or I can go through LibreOffice Base and open that database from here as well. But in this case, you don't have any existing databases yet, so we are going to create that database. The other settings we don't need to change, so I'm going to click on next, and in here the default settings are good for us. So we would like to register this database, and we would like to open it for editing after we create it. So I'm going to click on finish now, and then this brings the dialog to create a new file. Let's do it on the desktop, and since this is Lab2, I will name it as Lab2, and the extension that Base uses is ODB, so it is also the same for OpenOffice database files. OpenOffice and LibreOffice have some common programs in it. So I'm going to click on Save, and then this will bring me my new database. And in this database, we have a bunch of different parts that we are going to be involved with. So we have the tables part. Remember, we already talked about our ER diagrams, and in the ER diagram, we have entity sets and relationships, etc. And each of these would be represented as a table in the database. So entity sets are going to be tables, but for relationships as well, we are going to use tables, and we are going to connect them together in different ways to create the relationship. So relationships and entity sets are going to be tables, but how we connect them will describe whether they are entities or relationships. We are going to create some queries in our database to retrieve the data in different shapes, let's say. And for that we use this queries part. We are going to create some graphical user interfaces, and to do that we are going to use forms, and reports are like more structured visualization for our queries. So first we are going to start with tables, and let's say that we would like to have some user table. So in the ER diagram, let's say we have a user entity with ID as its primary key and some name and maybe some amount of credits, let's say. So let's create such table. To do that, I should be under this tables tab, and then we are going to use create table in design view. There is also an option to use the wizard, but in our cases we suggest you to use the design view, and in the lab we are going to use the design view to create our tables. When you click on it, you have a bunch of rows to create new fields, and the columns represent the field name. So this is our attribute name in this case, and we also have the field type. In the ER diagram we are not talking about the data type, but in database we should set the data type, so whether this is a numeric field or is it a date or is it a text, etc. The description part is for us, so if you want to write what this field is used for, or whether there are some additional restriction on the data, etc., you can put some description there. So this is similar to a comment. So if you click on the field name, you can just type your field name. So for example, let's say this is our users, and for the ID we have, let's say, a user ID, UID attribute, and the data type automatically becomes text, but if you click on there you can change the data type. So there are a bunch of different data types, but in this course mostly we are going to use either numbers, so these are similar to integers. You can also use integers. There are text types, but there are two different text types. One ignores case sensitive, so one is case sensitive, the other is not. So if you use the ignore case, for example, it doesn't matter whether you capitalize the letter or not. So the letters match with capitals if you choose the ignore case. If you go with the other one, for example, I leave it a capital A and I also I leave it small a, then those two things will be different things. When you ignore case, I leave it capital A and I leave it small a are the same thing. So it kind of changes what you have. So let's go with ignore case, for example. In this case, for our name, let's say we are going to use it not for our UID. Let's say that for UID, let it become a number, and let's create a name for our users. Maybe we can say this is the uname for our user, and in this case let's make it text with ignore case, so that whether it is with capital letters or not, it should not change our matchings when we create queries. So this is something for the later stages actually, because with queries we would like to retrieve the data. Maybe we would like to find the matching names. In those cases, if somebody's name is by mistake written with a small letter, then we would not have any problems matching it. So let's also, for the sake of example, let's say we have some credits for each user, which is going to be a number as well. This is, we are going to use it for our queries to have some more interesting queries actually. And for the other data types, in this class we might need the date data type and also the boolean yes no kind of data type, and the others are like different sizes of numbers, which in our case we do not care about how big our fields are, so you can go with the number. But let's say we do not store that big many numbers in our database. In such cases, to have better use of the space, we might use smaller or sometimes bigger data types that allow bigger numbers, or that have some small range of numbers. But in this course, mostly we are going to use numbers, the text, either with ignore case or with not, the boolean, and also the date. So the credits is going to be a number in this case. So when you click one of these fields, you should see the field properties on the bottom screen here. And these give you additional settings for each of the fields. For example, the first one is entry required. To create a new entry in my database, whether this attribute is required or not, this is how I set it here. For example, should there be some users without names? I think not, so I can make the username required, so that the users cannot create a new entry in this table without giving a valid username. But for credits, for example, maybe some of the new users will not have any credits in it, so I can make it not required, so I can leave this field empty when I'm creating new data for it. There's also length. So length describes for text how many letters there could be, and for numeric fields what is my maximum value. And there is also the option for decimal places, for example, for the numbers. And these are like according to the data type that I have. So if this was, for example, date, then these settings would be according to the date type. And what we also need is to set a primary key for our table. So in all of our tables, there should be some primary key. The primary key should be the unique things. But if there, in some cases, multiple attributes should, multiple attributes could contribute to a composite primary key. So right now for our user table, UID is the single primary key. To make it the primary key, you can right click on this gray rectangle and you can choose primary key. So it assigns it as the primary key of this table. And you will see this key symbol next to it, indicating that this is the primary key. So for example, if I wanted to make the name the primary key, I can right click on the name, the uname, and choose primary key, and then it is assigned as this new primary key. In the cases that I need to create a composite primary key, meaning that, for example, maybe UID plus credits is going to be my primary key, in that case, I hold my control key on the keyboard and choose multiple lines using these gray rectangles, and then you can right click on like one of these rectangles and click on the primary key to create a composite primary key. In this case, these symbols appear next to both UID and the credits. But in our case, there should be single primary key, which is the UID. Therefore, I'm just going to right click next to it and make it the primary key. One other thing that you might realize is that when we make something the primary key, it automatically becomes required. So if I remove the primary key from UID, I can set whether this is required or not. But if I make it the primary key, then the required property goes away, meaning that it has to be required. So let's say this is my table and I would like to save my table. So you have under file, you have the save option, or you might use Ctrl S on your keyboard. And while you are saving, you give the name to that table. And in this case, let's name it as user. And for table names or any of the field names, etc., don't use empty spaces. So if you need to show some space, you can use the underline character, or you can start with a capital letter, etc., something like that. But in this case, this is going to be simply just user. Our table's name is user. When I click on OK, my table will be created, and each of these new tables opens as different windows. So I can right now close this window, and under my tables part, I have my user table saved. If I need to return back to editing it, I need to right click on the table name, and then I can click on edit. So this brings me back into the editing. So this is the table design. You can see the naming here. But if I would like to enter some new data in it, then I should open it. Or you might just double click on the table. It also opens the table in the data view. So it's written here. In the data view, it's similar to Excel-like software. So you can create new entries in your tables with this view. So for example, I would like to create some new users. So this plus symbol indicates that I'm creating a new user on this line. So for example, the user ID could be 1. And while I see this pencil icon, it means that I'm currently editing, changing the data of this entry, and this entry has not been checked for valid data yet. So there will be some, in the future we will have some integrity rules, and the pencil icon means that it is not yet checked. So maybe if I write something like this, I'm still editing it. But when I go out of that column, it tries to save it, But since it cannot fit for the number data type, so if I write a letter in there, it cannot be converted into the number data type, then it reverse it to the default value. But for example, if I write 1 there, then it should remain as 1 there. So let's say the username is Ali, for example, and remember for credits, let's write some value, 1000, and you see that upper limit or the length for numbers is not based on I guess I'm not sure. Let's check it. So if I write a huge number, then it converts it to the scientific notation. But that 100 that we wrote there is not mentioning the upper limit in terms of the numbers value. So it's more like it's more like 100 units are used to store that data. So we might try different numbers there as well, but the default values are in our case okay, I think. So for credits, let's write some number and let's create some new user. So when I go out of that line, the pencil icon has disappeared, meaning that our data is in this table now. And I can close this table and reopen it, and my data will be there. So when the pencil icon is gone, that data is applied into our database without a requirement to save it. So in the data view, we don't really need to save the database. Each operation is applied directly on our database. So this is something to be careful about, because if we delete something, then there is no simple undo option to revert it back. So if I right click on this row and click on delete rows to delete Ali, so it will give me a warning, a confirmation. If I delete it, so under the edit part, there is no undo option for these operations because these are applied onto our database. So right now we just had one entry, but we might have millions of entries in our database. And these delete options are maybe handled with some queries on the backend. And if we delete something, there is no simple undo button. So when you are deleting things on your database, be careful about them. So let me just write it back. So you can use the tab key on your keyboard to go through different cells. So let's say in this case, number 2, Ayşe maybe has some more credits. And let's try to create some new entry without entering the UID. So I might go to the name. Maybe this is Ahmet, and let's say it has 130 credits. Right now I see the pencil icon. Whenever I try to go out of this row, then it will check the data for integrity. And the problem that I have now is that I do not give a value for UID. But remember, UID is the primary key of my table and it has to be given. Otherwise we have a problem. So this is how the database describes that problem. So for UID, it says it's non-nullable. It cannot be remain null. We have to give some value to that table. So this is like the more detail about our error. But if you click on OK, now I need to find some new ID for Ahmed. Let's say I wrote 2. So whenever I try to go out of this row, now it gives me a different error. It says that it will create duplicate values for column UID. So for UID, it has to be unique. And if I write 2 there, it will create a duplicate value which is not allowed. It's for our primary key. And then there is a problem. Then I can, for example, write 3, and then I have no problem with my data. Let's say I return to one of these rows, for example, for Ali, and let's remove the name of Ali. The pencil icon indicates that I made some changes, and when I try to go out of that row, it checks for integrity, and now it says uname is also non-nullable. I cannot have null values for uname. Remember, we made uname required, therefore we cannot have null values for them. So I will click on OK. And let's say that I don't know what the problem is. there is the pencil icon. I try to go out of this line, but I get the error. In that case, to cancel the edit operation, you can hit the escape key on your keyboard, then it reverses that row back. Or if this is a new row, for example, let's say I wrote 3 here, some name, etc. I try to go out, I get the error, I don't understand the error. In that case, again, I can hit the escape key to revert it back, meaning that since this was a new row, it will be just removed. But for credits, let's say for Esra, I can leave the credits empty. Remember? Okay, what does it say? It says that credits cannot be empty as well. Maybe we made it required, so let me check it. So I will hit the escape key, and I can close this table view, right click on my user database, click on edit, and I will check credits. So I made the entry required. Credits are required right now, but I can set it as credits not required. So I will save the options for this table design. So for the table design, whenever I change something, it is not automatically applied. I need to save it for this one. But when I open it in the data view, once I write something here, then now I can like leave the credits empty. And for existing ones as well, I can leave the credits empty. Let's write something here. So this is one table, and obviously we are going to have multiple tables in our database. And let's say we have a new table for courses. So under the tables part, I will click on create table in design view. And let's say we store some courses in our database with their course IDs, course names, and some section field, let's say. So course ID, CID, let's keep it as text, but maybe this is the maximum length for my text, and I don't need this many. For example, maybe I want to put some restriction, then I can write a smaller number, for example 5, or maybe like if we have things like Math 101, it could be like the 7 as the maximum limit. And let's also have the section. Section is going to be a number in this case. So if you click on this length, it gives you additional information about what this is. So you might like check it based on the data that you are using. Let's also say that we have course name, CNAME, and it is going to be a text as well. And this is, let's say, the long format for that course. So let's say I would like to make CID and section the composite primary key. I can click on CID, hold Control key on my keyboard, and left click on the section as well. So while I'm choosing these, I use these gray squares or rectangular parts on the left side. I choose both of them by holding Control key on my keyboard, and then right click on this gray part and set them as the primary key. And then I can save this table, and I will give the name course for this table. And now I can close this table. So I have two tables in my database. I can double click on the course table. This is for setting or creating some new entries in my database. So for example, I can have things like CS181 for course ID, but if I try to write a longer text here, then when I try to go out of there, okay, there was actually no problem now. Maybe we said it wrong. Let me check it for CID. Okay, so for CID, the length is 100 now. Maybe after I made the primary key, something changed. So right now I save it, and if I come back here to refresh my data, but we did not add it yet, right? Remember, there is the pencil icon. So I'm writing something here, when I go out of that row, it doesn't change. But when I try to go into a different row, now I get the error saying that value is too long for this statement. So it now checks for the integrity. If we look at it into the edit view to the course table, for CID we have length 7. This is the maximum number of letters that we can keep in there. But while the pencil icon is there, it does not check for this. When I try to go out of that row, then it checks and says this statement is too long, etc. So be careful about it. So let's say this is Math 101, and let's say section 1, and for the course name, calculus something, for example. And let's say for other section, we might have like Math 101, section 2, and the course name can be calculus again. And you are going to see some more efficient ways of removing duplicate entries, let's say. So right now we are kind of wasting space because we have the course ID and section in the same table, and we need to write the course name multiple times for each of these entries. Right now we are not worried about that. So for this, to keep this example simpler, we are going to keep the course name in the same table as well. But in real life cases, what we need to do is so we can relate Math 101 to calculus in one table, and we might have some other table that relates the course IDs to sections, for example. But in this case, let's keep it simpler, but this is not that efficient in terms of how we store the data. Be careful about that. Just know about that. So maybe we have CS281, it could be section 1, and our course name with all those things, and let's simply say database for this now. And remember, CID and section is our composite primary key, meaning that I cannot have both of them appearing twice in my table. So right now I see the pencil icon when I try to go out of that line. This gives me the error saying that it will create duplicate primary keys. So it also says that CID and section is my composite primary key, and it creates a duplicate for this. Otherwise, separately, if you consider CID can have duplicate values. If you consider section separately, section can have duplicate values. But as a tuple, as two fields, this cannot duplicate. This cannot have any duplicate values as a combination of these two fields. So that is what means we have a composite primary key. So maybe we have Turkish 101, etc. with section 1. And let's close this table as well. Now I would like to relate some users to some courses. Again, I need a table, but this time I would like to use this table as a relationship. So the role of this table would be different. But how I create that table is going to be the same. I will go to create table design in design view, and this is going to be my table. And in a table for a relationship, other than the attributes I need to store, like in the ER diagram, you might have some attributes that are attached to your relationships. Obviously, for those attributes, you are going to create some fields. But additionally, you need to create some foreign keys inside this table. So in the ER diagram, I connect my relationship to entities, a bunch of entities. And those lines means that I need to store some foreign key in my relationship that is going to reference the primary keys of the related entities. So in this case, I would like to relate courses to users, and I need to check the primary key of the user. So UID is the primary key of user table. And I also need to know the data type, because those foreign keys, to be able to refer to the primary key with the foreign key, data types should match exactly. So I will go to the edit for my user table, and I have UID here with number. So this means that when I come to my new table, I need some foreign key that is going to reference the UID, the primary key of the user table. I can use different names here. I can write anything that I want, but to make things simpler, using the same names help. So the names are not that important. I need to keep them at some parts to match them. But what is important is the field type, so it should match exactly. Therefore, I need to make it number. Okay, I have a foreign key that is going to refer the primary key of the user table. I also need something similar for the course table. I will open the course table in edit view. And in my new table here, I need to reference the primary key of this course table. And the primary key of this course table is a composite one. There are two things that I need to store to find a unique row in the course table. One is the CID, which is a text. Additionally, for that text, I have additional length setting, right? For CID, the maximum length is 7. I also need the section, which is a number. I need these two things. And this is going to be my new table. And for the enrolled course, let's say we are also keeping the grade. Let me write a grade field name. Let's say this is just for one exam, we are storing the grade, and let's make it simply a number. And it is not going to be required because we may have nothing as the grade as well. So for now, I'm not interested in the other tables. I will actually close them. And for this new table, I'm going to need a primary key as well. So let's try to save it first. Control S. This is going to be my enrolled relationship. When you click on OK, it will give a warning saying that there is no primary key. Do you want to create the primary key now? It asks. Let's cancel this saving operation and create the primary key by ourselves. And the primary key for the relationships actually is determined by the cardinality. So if this is a one-to-one or one-to-many relationship, for such relationships, I need to just store the one parts key. So for example, if this was a scenario where each user can enroll to only one course, let's say for a course there could be multiple users, but each user can only enroll to just one course. In such table, if I just store the information about the user, that's going to be enough. I don't need, as my primary key, I don't need CID plus section, because if I know the user's ID, then I can find a unique row in this table in case I have a one-to-many or one-to-one relationship. But here we have a many-to-many case, meaning that many users can enroll to the same course, and in the same course there could be many users. And I say the same thing twice, sorry. The same user can enroll into multiple courses, and in the same course there could be multiple users. This is a many-to-many relationship, and in many-to-many relationships we need the composites as our primary key. So one foreign key is UID coming from the user part. The other foreign keys are coming from the course side, and they are the combination of CID and section, and I need to make all these three my primary key, since this is a menu-to-menu relationship. So I'm going to choose all three of them with holding my control key on my keyboard, and then I let go control and right click on this gray rectangle and choose primary key and make all these three the primary key, and they are automatically made required. But for grade it is not required. And I think like in the beginning we set different things as the primary key, and when you make something the primary key and when you revert it back, I think it remains as required, and that's why we had required in the beginning of this video. So now I can save this and give the name enrolled. Then I can close this editing part. And if you double click on the table enrolled, it is another table with all the options that we can do for course and user. So for example, for UID, I can write something. For CID, I can write something. For section and grade. And this is not giving me any problems, because so far I haven't related my tables. So I don't have such user, I don't have such course, but I was able to enter this data in my enrolled table, because my enrolled table, although I created some attributes to be used as foreign keys, I did not link them. Because of that, I can just enter random data in here, but this is not what we want for relationships. So I will right click on this new entry and click on delete rows to remove it. Let's close this table. I would like to relate my tables, to use some of the tables as my relationships. To do that, under tools part, we have the relationships tool. So when you click on relationships, it will open the relation design window, and we have this dialog to add tables. So these are my tables that exist in my database, and I can bring these tables into my relation design to link different attributes. So in this case, I need all three of my tables, because the enrolled relation is in between user and course. So in this part, you have the option to double click or to click on add to add multiple tables for the relation design. Some tables might be not involved in some relations, etc. But in our case, mostly each table is at least related to one other table. So I'm going to close this window, and in this relation design part, we can click and hold our left mouse button to move the relation or move the tables around, or you can also resize the tables. So these are our existing tables, and they are shown as some summaries of attributes. So in user table, we have UID as the primary key. You see the key icon, and additionally you have uname and credits fields, etc. And in this view, we would like to link the attributes, so link the foreign keys with primary keys. And while you are doing it, we are going to drag the attributes into other attributes of different tables. So for example, I will carry the UID from the user table into the UID of the enrolled table. And while you are doing it, one thing is important. Where you start from is the parent. It is described as the parent of this link, and where you end is the child. And to be able to enter some entry for the child, this link will make sure that what I'm writing for the child will exist first in the parent. So for example, in our case, to be able to enter some new user for the enrolled, to assign some user to a course, to enroll some user to a course, what I need first is for that user to exist. So for this UID 2, for example, I would like to write in my enrolled table 2 for the UID. To be able to write it, it should first exist in the parent, which is the user table. So it is going to check whether 2 exists in my parent or not. To create such link, I need to start from the parent. So on the parent user UID, I drag UID of parent to the UID of child, which is enrolled in this case. I use my left mouse button, click on UID, drag it into the UID of enrolled. This brings my relations dialog. In here, it shows the tables that are involved, which is assigned when I drag one attribute into the another. It assigns these tables, but there is also the attributes of those tables. So on the left side, I have the enrolled relation, and on the right side, I have my user. And this should look how it is assigned. So if I do it the other way around, then it doesn't give me the relationship dialog as well. So maybe you can realize that you are doing something wrong when it doesn't give you the relationship dialog. So this is not true. So I'm going to right click on this line and click on delete. I need to carry it from the parent into the child. So this is the correct view. Enrolled is on left side. My relationship is on the left side. My entity is on the right side. But sometimes in the future we might use it for aggregate relationships as well. So in the case of aggregate relations, again, I should start dragging from what's inside the dashed rectangle, from that relationship into the other relationship, because what I have in the dashed rectangle should exist first so that I can add something into the aggregate relationship which is outside the dashed rectangle. In other words, what I have in the dashed rectangle kind of acts like an entity. So let's come back to our example. In this case, we want UIDs to match. So if we carry the wrong things around, this might be wrong, and then we need to set it back so that the foreign key in the enroll table is matching with the primary key of the user table. And there is also some update and delete options underneath. And most of the time, unless we mention otherwise in the, for example, homework, we expect you to use the update cascade and delete cascade options. What it makes is that let's say I have a bunch of users and I enrolled some users to some courses, and let's say I need to change the primary key in my parent table. So user with ID 2, I need to update its ID, let's say, to 5. In that case, when I set 5 as my new primary key in the user table, if the update cascade option is selected, it will also update it in the child. In the enrolled table, instead of having 2, it will update it to 5, for example. Otherwise, if no action is selected, then in the enrolled table, I will have UID 2, which is no longer a valid user for my database. So most of the time we would like to use update cascade and delete cascade options. Delete cascade makes sure that when you delete a user, the reference instances in the children, or in this case in the relationship enrolled, will also be deleted. So for example, if I delete user number 3, if that user is enrolled into some courses, these trees are no longer valid. So there is no user 3 in my database any longer, so it will also delete those instances. So when I click on OK, this will create a new link between user and enrolled tables, and you will see this 1 and n symbols. So this is not something to be confused with our cardinality in the relationship in the ER diagram. This is something different, because what we are looking is only the half of the relationship. So right now, this 1 and n means that 1 is the primary key in here, UID is the primary key in this table, and it can match with multiple things in the enrolled table. So these 1 and n symbolize that. So if I double click on the line, it brings up the relations dialog again. And let's also create a link for the course site. Again, this time course is going to be the parent and enrolled is going to be the child, because course is the entity and enrolled is the relation. To be able to add some instance of a course, that course should exist first in the course table, in the entity table, in the parent table. And this time I need to relate two attributes together, because these are my composite primary key, so you can right click and choose both of them. But when you try to carry, it only carries it for one. So we need to first start with carrying one of it. So for example, CID. I will carry CID of course into the CID of enrolled table. And in this relations dialog, I can set the remaining keys, remaining attributes of my composite primary key. So in this case, on the enrolled part, I have section, which references the section of the course. To be able to find a unique course, I need both of these at the same time. So if I cancel it, let's say I only carry CID of the course to the CID of enrolled, and let's say I choose update and delete cascades. When I click on OK, it will give me an error saying that, okay, primary or unique constraint required on main table course. So for the course, it says that I need some primary or unique constraint. With only CID, it says that I cannot find a unique entry in the course table, so I cannot relate them yet. So this is the error that we get if we have a composite primary key. So in this case, I also need to set the section as my other matching attributes, and when I click on OK, then it will create a double link. But sometimes it does not show the symbols. It doesn't mean that we said it wrong, but like for some different settings, since we are using two attributes in this case, I guess it does not show the symbols. With the relation design, I need to save it as well. So I'm going to save my relations design and then close this window. Now, if I go into the enroll table, whenever I try to enter some new data here, let's say right now I'm still editing it. If I try to go out of this row, it will give me an error. It says that, okay, integrity constraint violation, no parent in table user. So I entered some UID here, but with this UID, there is no such parent in the user table. I am entering data into the enroll table, but for UID 234, there is no such parent. This is basically the error that I get. And setting my relationships helps me with the database integration, so integrity. So if I was able to enter some random data here, then I would have problems because no such user exists. But if I open my user table, then I know that user ID 1 is a valid user. And if I also open my courses table, I will see my existing courses. So these are my existing courses. So for example, I can enroll Ali to CS281 with section 1, and I can leave the grade as empty. And now I don't have any problems. I can also enroll Ali to some other courses, Math 101 for example, maybe this time section 2. Maybe we have the grade already. I can try enrolling Ali into the same course and same section, but whenever I try to go out of this line, I will get an error saying that it will create duplicate values for columns UID, CID, and section. Because remember, for enrolled table, we made the primary key these three attributes, UID, CID, section, and together as a tree, as a group of three, they cannot have any duplicate values. So 1, CS281 1, again I have the same thing, which is not allowed. But if I change the section into 2, in the real life examples, maybe this is not that correct, but for our database, for our rules, it is a correct entry. I can also for this one, let's change it to maybe some other user, Ayşe. I can enroll Ayşe to the same course, so CS281, to the same section. I can enroll some other people to the same course as well, CS281, maybe with some grades, etc. So with the relationships that we created, we made sure that whenever we enter some data in our relationship, that data is first existing in the parent tables. So for example, user 4, maybe I write CS101 with section 1. When I try to go out of that row, this time it says that on the course side I don't have CS101. So that's the reason of this problem. No such parent, it says. So then I need to check my course table and see that there is no such class, and I need to correct it. Also remember that we wrote, I guess, for this data type, we set the data type to case sensitive. So if I write Turkish 101 with small letters, it cannot find the matching parent since it was case sensitive. So this is something to be careful about as well. So right now, let me close my tables, and like whenever I need to open my table, I can just double click on that table's name. And under my tools relationships, I can always come back to this relationships view. And let's say I have additional tables, I can click on this add tables dialog and bring those tables into this view as well to create some new relationships. And in our databases, mostly this is how we create a database that follows the ER diagram. And in the upcoming video, we are going to talk about creating SQL queries using the design view.